Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Classical Conversations. I'm Jess Slais, the Vice President of Artistic Administration at the Nashville Symphony, and I'm so glad to be back today with Music Director Giancarlo Guerrero. How are you, Giancarlo?
Hi, Jess. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Well, let's jump right in. I have to confess, I have been looking forward to this concert all year. It is the richest tapestry of sound and amazing pieces. And there's, I think, so much for you to share with our audience about what they're going to hear this weekend. So let's start right off with Sibelius.
Well, this is a piece that John Sibelius wrote originally thinking of it as an opera. It is based on the Finnish epic of the Kalevala, and Sibelius being the most important composer from Finland and being very interested in the great epics and stories of the ancient history of this country. And in this particular case, the section that we're going to play is the Swan of Tuonela, which actually in the epic of the Kalevala, Tuonela is the realm of the dead, and it is being ruled by a swan that kind of flies all over. And there's a river of black water. It's kind of a dark place to begin with. I guess this time of year, especially in the winter, is very, very dark in that part of the world. But in this case, the voice of the swan is being led by an English horn, which basically serves almost as a soloistic voice on top of the orchestra, kind of very mystical, very dark, very beautiful, very melancholy. And it's a work that I've been wanting to do for many years because it's so beautiful, but it's hard to program because you want to do the whole Kalevala at times. But because this program is perfect, as you mentioned, with so many colors, this is a piece that I think is a great opener to showcase not only Tamara, our wonderful English horn player right now in the orchestra, but at the same time showcase this wonderful, beautiful piece by Sibelius that showcases a lot of the, as I said, the Finnish ancient history and a wonderful way to kick off a very colorful program.
I agree. The words you're using for Sibelius are one of the things I love about his writing. He has that way with a sort of darkness and drama, and then the light bursting through that is totally him. So I think it's perfect for this time of year, like you said. Well, then we have one of the great concertos, Brahms' Concerto for Violin and Cello, and a very looked forward opportunity for you to bring our concertmaster and our principal cellist together to solo with the orchestra.
Correct. And this piece by Brahms is actually rather unusual because, I mean, when you think of concerto, you think piano concerto, violin concerto, but this is more like a Sinfonia Concertan where it showcases two instruments and two very important instruments within the orchestra, and showcasing, of course, Jun Iwasaki, our concertmaster, and Kevin Bater, principal cello player. And the story behind this concerto is actually quite personal as well. Johannes Brahms had a very close relationship with the great violinist Joseph Joachim, the great Hungarian violinist, for whom he had already written a sonata and the great Brahms violin concerto. But apparently they had a big falling out somewhere after all of these great collaborations because Joseph Joachim was going through a very, very bitter divorce from his wife. And apparently Brahms has sided with the wife in this very public divorce, and apparently even went to the newspaper and mentioned stuff that was a little demeaning to Joachim. And Joachim said, "I'm done with Brahms. We're never going to talk ever again." And this went on for a couple of decades, actually. And then Brahms, and I think, came to realize that, Joachim was a very important person in his own life. So he wrote this concerto literally as a peace offering to try to get back into the good graces of his good friends, Joseph Joachim. And Joachim, actually, to his credit, accepted the peace offering, and they reconciled and became best friends again. And the premiere, of course, Joseph Joachim played the solo violin part, and they brought in a good friend of both of them, Robert Hausmann, who played the cello part. And this is now, I guess, the great, I would say, the great king of Sinfonia Concertans, because it showcases two very important instruments. And I can tell you from a lot of friends who are cello players, they've always wondered what would have happened if Brahms would have written an actual cello concerto.
Yes.
And in many ways, the cello, they might make the case that almost carries the more important voice even more than the violin. But as I said before, Brahms wrote this piece more as a peace offering to regain the friendship. And so there's a happy ending to the story. And in many ways, this piece is perfectly balanced because you really get to hear both these soloists basically leading the way. It's really hard to tell who has the leading voice in so many ways. And of course, as it is with Brahms, the orchestral part is equally as important. So this is a piece that I've always enjoyed conducting many times. But I do know that both June and Kevin are loving the opportunity to play it, because it really requires a great degree of connection
Right.
emotionally and mentally and musically between the both of them. So for me, it's going to be a great way to collaborate with them beyond the actual orchestral chairs.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're constantly checking in with each other in regular orchestra playing, and to bring them down front and build on that and have orchestral soloists is a really special opportunity.
Indeed.
Um, yeah. So after intermission, Jennifer Higdon, great friend of the orchestra, of
Mhm.
course,
Mhm.
but a piece of hers we have not done in Nashville.
That is correct. And this is a piece that is a very favorite of mine. It comes from 1999 and also a very personal work for Jennifer. The title Blue Cathedral actually has a personal relationship, because around the time that she wrote the piece for the 75th anniversary of the Curtis Institute in Philadelphia, where she went to school and where she currently teaches, by the way, her younger brother, Andrew Blue Higdon, had passed away from skin cancer, which is kind of a sad story. So the piece kind of became a way of getting over that very sad moment in her life. And so, as you can hear, the middle name for Andrew was Blue. So that's where the title Blue Cathedral come from. And she always also talks in the program notes for the piece that she thinks of cathedrals as places where you almost go from the realm of the living into the dead. I mean, it's a very a place where you can do a lot of meditation, a lot of thinking about all of these traumatic experiences. But along with that, this piece is incredibly colorful. It's about 10 minutes long, and it showcases particularly a flute and a clarinet. And Jennifer was a self-taught flute player, and her brother, Andrew, was a clarinet player. So you can see the connection of basically the two siblings kind of speaking to each other. And at the end of the piece, basically, the clarinet is left speaking by itself. So there are so many personal connections in this piece that it's actually uh, quite moving when you think about it. Jennifer also mentioned that there are moments in this piece that become a little bit raucous, because I mean there was anger involved, of course, when something like this happens, and questioning what is really behind all of this. But in the end, the piece ends in great peace and great acceptance, I guess, of this, and he utilizes a few unusual techniques, like ask a few of the players to grab wine glasses and do what we normally do when we get our fingers wet and start playing on the rims of the glasses. So we have quite a few players basically creating that effect and giving us a sense of, again, of meditation. And she also calls for what are called Chinese health balls, which are these little bells that a lot of the players are going to have, and they're going to shake them at particular moments, again, to create a very meditation, very relaxed moment, very personal moment, I say. So as you mentioned before, this is a piece that really brings a lot of unusual colors into the orchestra, but in the same way, it showcases the great ability that Jennifer has to bringing beautiful colors into the orchestral palette. And again, a wonderful friend of the orchestra, and we're delighted to champion this other earlier piece from her career.
Yeah, fantastic. And then we close the program with the absolute master of color, Ravel, and really one of my favorite pieces of his, the Mother Goose Suite.
Well, this one, again, also very personal work for Ravel. He wrote this originally for piano for hands, and he wrote it for the children of very close friends of his, who at the time were 6 and 7 years old. And the piece is based on the beautiful stories from Charles Perrault that many of us are familiar with. And because the piece was such a huge success in the original version for the four hands, he orchestrated it later and turned it actually into a full ballet. And in the suite, there are five of these fairy tales that come through. The first one being Sleeping Beauty, which we're all very familiar. And if you may be aware, they're not the Disney version. When you hear the Disney
Yeah.
version, they're very, colorful and happy, intended for families. But the original version of these fairy tales tend to be a little bit, darker, a little bit actually not quite as happy. And although the music tends to be beautiful, Ravel really gets to explore a little bit more of the darker side of these stories. The second one, of course, is Tom Thumb, where the child is throwing the breads of crumb and trying to find his way back, and the birds, of course, come and eat it, and he forgets his way back. The third one is La Deronette, the Princess of the Pagodas, which is a story that is based a lot more on the Far East, and you hear a lot of pentatonic scales on this music. And then the next one is one of my absolute favorites, and one that particular members of the orchestras love, because it is the conversation between the beauty and the beast. And in this case, the beauty is represented by the clarinet, and the beast is very wildly represented by the contrabassoon, who doesn't get many solos, but this one may be the most famous solo for contrabassoon, representing the very grotesque and ugly, beast. But you do have the happy ending here, where the beast eventually becomes a prince at the end, and you hear that very clearly with the harp playing this beautiful glissando as the moment of metamorphosis happens. And then the very end is the magic garden, where we once again get Prince Charming running into the Sleeping Beauty and runs into her and gives her the famous kiss, and they live happily ever after. And the piece ends with, wedding bells and very, as I would call it, the Disney ending.
Yes.
So this music is absolutely, as you mentioned, a jewel of orchestration. Ravel, very few composers are as capable as he was when it came to writing for orchestra. And in these 5 stories, you really get to hear the stories told by the orchestra without utilizing any words whatsoever.
Yeah. Thank you, Giancarlo. I mean, any one of these pieces would be a special moment on a concert, and this combination is going to be an exceptional set of evenings. Thank you all so much for your time and for joining us today to learn a little bit more. We look forward to seeing you at this weekend's concerts, February 11 and 12, with Brahms, Birds, and Blue Cathedral. You can find more information about this weekend and all of our upcoming performances at nashvillesymphony.org.